how can you equip yourself with a toolbox to actually be happy and feel good in a modern day world that we have never lived in before, and therefore have never been taught how to live in it.
Yeah.
And so like all the stuff that I've gone through, I needed to go through that to be able to understand how to equip people to get to this level of like, awareness and bliss and calm and peace and happiness. And it isn't always like that. And I know that life is always throwing more curveballs at us. And so no matter how much we've grown, and I know you know the healing journey, it's like, oh, I thought I fixed this, and oh, this came back. What's going on? It's not linear. Embrace and enjoy the journey. Because if you keep waiting until like you get the thing or do the thing or accomplish the thing, you're literally just putting off your happiness. And so just to be able to like experience life and consciousness is a gift in and of itself.
Yeah, I started nutrition, and I had grown the podcast like really big in the health and wellness space.
Nice.
And it was like a top 25 show, and I was so I was in LA. I'm like living my best life. Also, just like my ego was so happy, you know? And that came because I had like pretty extreme chronic illness that I almost died from.
Wow.
And I was working as a nutritionist, and then that kind of resurged and pulled me into spirituality. And when I got pulled into that, all my psychic gifts turned back on. And then, like, long story short, I eventually transitioned the business like into spirituality. And when I did that, I switched to like solo episodes basically for a while. And then in the last, I don't know, year or so, I was like, I miss people.
Yeah.
And that was also during COVID. It was like harder to do in person. But like when I think about the things that light me up and like the core through line of all the transition in my life over the last 10 years, it's like the podcast has been my anchor point. I have met the best people, like my closest friends, like the most incredible people in the world, the most important people in my life through this show, you know? So it's like, it's my longest relationship thus far, you know?
That's so powerful.
So yeah,
that's really cool.
It's cool to have just a space to like,
and I'm super grateful to just even be here. And
thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That's been a dream of mine too, just because I always like ask the question of like, how can I make the most impact at scale, right? And I think podcasts are one of the absolute best ways to do that. It's a modern day technology, and it's just the best way to get your message to the masses. And it's like I have so much information in my head and my body and my spirit and my own journey. It's like, you know, I've coached over 70 clients at this point, which is amazing. And there's definitely like a ripple effect that I probably don't even see that I take for granted. But like, I'm trying to change this thing at, you know, a systemic level, like, you know, political level, government level, because I know that's where the root is. And just like health and just like nutrition, you have to get to the root of it. And so like, I want to see, you know, young kids in elementary school eating the right foods, because that's really where it starts. So that's kind of like my grander mission and vision, is to get to the root of it all. And again, I'm having a blast like doing the one-on-one or the group coaching and building community, and that's been so fun. And even just doing some of my own retreats now, which is really cool. But yeah, just like where my North Star is just like going for the head of the snake.
Do you have a vision for that path? Like, do you know what you want that to look like?
Yeah, I think like, I mean, just trusting and enjoying the journey and like where I'm at now. I mean, the transition I've gone from the first day I ever started an Instagram page, which was in January of, you know, 2021, like right after the pandemic happened, not really knowing where it was going to lead me to, you know, starting to get some clients, doing a bunch of one-on-one stuff, and probably coaching like 45 clients at that point, and then hitting some, you know, intense burnout. And then that, kind of was honestly like my awakening. I feel like my spiritual awakening, and I feel like I'm still very new to it compared to where you are. But it's like, even starting as a nutrition coach 3 years ago, I would have never even imagined I would be talking about some of the things I talk about, or practicing some of the things I talk about, because, like I said before, like the weird stuff works. And now that I just know so much and have gone through so much and been in a really dark place, it's like I find it hard not to teach that stuff, because it's all connected. And like what I found, even though like my clients have gotten great results in the past, there have been some who've gotten stuck, and it's like I never knew why. It was like I was telling them all the right things to do, but for some reason like they couldn't get it done. And it's, you know, been representative in my own life too. It's like, you know, we always kind of like know what we need to do, but we don't do it for some reason. And as I'm sure you know super well, it's like our nervous system and our energy. And so that was kind of the missing piece I never knew I needed.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you because I feel like, I mean, when I found your stuff, I mean, I love your content.
Thank you.
And your energy, like you have this real, genuine, just like hunger to help people. And it's so clear. And I know that because I have that same kind of fight. And I remember like early, I mean, because when I started this, I was 19. And there were so many people that were just, you know, so much older than me, further ahead. And they would see that in me and they're like, they would see that like fight, like how hard I was just like, I want to help people. Like, I don't want people to suffer like this. Like, this is bullshit. Everything's happening with the food system. And like, and for me, that all started, it was like chronic illness, but that started with like extreme depression, extreme anxiety, like ADHD stuff, all of that. And so going through the torture of like my mental health and then the physical health and then just seeing everybody else, you know, struggle. Like it was personal, you know, and you have that same like hunger, I feel.
Thank you.
And I just feel like when you have that, it's unstoppable, honestly, you know, because it's not an ego desire. It's like, this is my mission. Yeah. And I know that is what has allowed me to magnetize all the right people right to me. Like, people see that and they want to help people. Right. Definitely. And so I want to go back into like why this is so personal and your story. So you said that like the burnout piece was in 2020, 2021.
So I'll back up a little bit. Yeah. I feel like I have like an origin story and then kind of an evolving story.
Yeah.
So my origin story was really just growing up as an athlete and having this like burn it off mentality. I could eat whatever I wanted. It wouldn't matter. You know, 3-hour basketball practices, I just sweat it off. But it was like buffalo chicken calzones and pizza and like frozen waffles and cereal. And it was like, oh, it's fine. Like, I look fine. I'm good. But I was obviously just destroying, you know, my metabolism and my internal organs. And I didn't really put 2 and 2 together, how like maybe my afternoon energy crashes or my food comas or just like, you know, my anxiety maybe had something to do with food. Yeah. But I was never taught that. So why would I think that? And so I suffered from chronic acne for like probably 7 years. And I had like terrible hemorrhoids, and it was really embarrassing, you know, like having to like go up to my basketball coach and be like, hey, like I have this thing, like I can't really play today, yada, yada. And like that obviously was one physical thing, but also, you know, it crushed my mental health and just kind of disassociating. And I didn't know these things at the time, but now like what I've learned, I've realized that that's kind of what I was doing. And then I had a silver lining of a shoulder injury after I was doing calisthenics. My friend like introduced me to this like a whole new way of working out. And that labrum tear in my shoulder kind of opened me up to the human body. And then I started to like just get into nutrition a little bit more. And I started shopping at Whole Foods, and I realized like all the best foods were coming from California. And then like my buddy had kind of told me, you know, like SoCal is sort of the mecca for all health and wellness. And
the mecca.
Yeah. And then I moved out here. And I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, who I'm going to meet, where, when, or why, but like something good is going to happen. And that good thing was the pandemic. Yeah. And it was, quote, good for me because it was the first time in my life where I actually slowed down. Yeah. And I paused. And I think a lot of people can relate to that in a lot of ways. And oftentimes when you pause, those thoughts can be really uncomfortable. Yeah. But they're actually the very thing that teach us exactly what we need to know.
Yeah. Can I pause you?
Sure.
Because so like you're dealing with these different symptoms and you get the shoulder injury and then, you know, you want to come out here because but like, what was it like at this point? You're starting to eat healthy. Is that what's going on? You're changing your diet?
I mean, relatively subjectively, right? I think that's a very subjective word, but yeah, just like starting to care more about like, you know, the types of food I was eating.
Yeah.
Like looking at
how did you connect that though? Like, did somebody tell you that? Because I'll tell you, I have a very similar, like almost exact. Yeah. Like from like, it was the acne. It was for me, I was just like, I mean, I did not poop for like 8 years. Like, and I'm dead ass serious. It was insane. And then I got an extreme shoulder injury. I couldn't play volleyball anymore. Like I couldn't use my shoulder. But it took me so much longer. Like it took me like 5 years after that to even understand that nutrition was at play. Yeah. So I'm just wondering how that came into the picture.
Yeah, I'm super grateful. I mean, one of my best friends growing up, Mark, like I've literally known him since I was 0 years old, like born in the same hospital. And like, we've always just been athletes and like, just, yeah, without even realizing it, I guess, as little kids, just like wanting to be our highest expression, like just playing the most ridiculous games, just always outside. And so he was the one that introduced me to calisthenics. I don't know if you've heard of Ido Portal.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. So he went and did one of his classes, his week-long classes in Australia. He went out to Perth.
Cool.
Which is like as far west as you can go in Australia. There's not much out there. And he had kind of his own reflective journey, and he started showing me calisthenics. So I became obsessed with it because I was like, I've had the same workout routine for like 8 years. And then, I started doing like 2-a-days calisthenics, and again, like, to a fault, but biggest silver line again was that shoulder injury. And so because I was like, oh, like how, like I wonder how I injured my shoulder, I just kind of like started doing some research on the body, and then just obviously food has a big part to do with that. But when I first started, like it was very basic stuff. It's just like, all right, I'm gonna eat some more nuts and seeds and like have some more fruits and vegetables.
Okay.
And like I just saw the change, like both with like the physical like neuroplasticity from the calisthenics and just like eating better. Like I was like performing better than I ever had in my corporate job, and like things were just clicking. And
what were you doing at your corporate job?
I was a account manager for a recruiting company for 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm very grateful. It taught me a lot, people skills and networking and sales skills, but it definitely burnt me to the ground. But yeah, anyway, so I moved out to California, and then the pandemic happened. And then for the first time in my life, I got introduced, again, grateful for that corporate job. Someone from one of my coworkers introduced me to Deepak Chopra. I did one of his 21-day meditation challenges, and I just became so much more grateful and so much more aware. And then like we started working from home, and then someone actually reached out to me about a supplement company, and I started to like, just like, oh, I'm going to go for this, 'cause like maybe something good will happen. And I was like trying to sell it, but then like as I did more research, I was like, I can't really get behind these ingredients. I was like trying to like sell it to like some of my friends back home. And then this one girl was like, oh, like, I'm not really a fan of that, but like you should check out IIN, Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And then I enrolled in that course, and literally within like 4 weeks of me just like learning a few things and changing my diet, like all my acne went away, my hemorrhoids went away. Like I felt like I was on top of the world, like my anxiety disappeared. And then I was just like, how does not everybody know this? Like, this is crazy. I got to tell people. And then as my awareness changed, all the things that are chalked up as normal, just like to me weren't, right? And we're just surrounded by poor health, and we live in a sick care system, and like, oh, it's just part of getting older. But I like wasn't willing to accept that. And it felt like it kind of turned from this like curiosity to like a mission, to like a full-blown calling from the universe. And I was like, again, I would feel guilty if I didn't like share this with people, because like I just know what it's done for me, and I just want to return that gift to people. So that was kind of my origin story.
Well, it seems very synchronistic, like as you're telling, it's like, oh, this person introduced me to
right.
It's like everything just kind of got delivered to you, which is very, very divine, where you're meant to be. With IIN, I mean, I went through NTA.
Okay.
Do you know that school?
No, what's that stand for?
Nutritional Therapy Association.
Cool.
So it's another program. But so I haven't gone through that program, but it's my understanding you learn about like a lot of different diets and like
very holistic.
Yeah.
That's what I read, because I did a short course through like Stanford. Sounds fancy, but it was like 8 weeks. And I mean, it was good. I learned a lot about like how to do like proper case studies and like get like well back research. But it was like way too focused on like calorie counting, and just didn't really resonate with me. Whereas IIN was more just getting different perspectives from different professionals, like whether it's Mark Hyman or whatever other like well-respected wellness people out there. And it was like not forceful, and it wasn't like, oh, this is the way to like do health. It was like, oh, this has worked for Dr. Mark Hyman. This has worked for this person. And that's what I really liked about it. It's just like the idea of like bio-individuality. Like one person might work perfect on this protocol, but it might be literally poison for the next person. So it's like like finding out what resonates with you and going with that. And I think like that's such an underrated thing that I know that you probably know very well, but like, when it boils down to it, like I feel like that's the number one skill I teach my clients, is like how to listen to your body.
That's hard though. So it's like, how do you teach people that?
Like encouraging them to really just listen to the feedback that their body is giving them based on like the foods they're eating or the news they're watching or the people that they're hanging out with. And just like, I think it all starts with awareness, because this is what Deepak says, you can't change what you're not aware of.
Yep.
Right. And so because we're so overstimulated in today's world, it's like we just become numb and then we don't even realize what's actually happening. Or like, oh, maybe I had this food yesterday and then this morning I actually kind of feel like crap.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, we talk about like alcoholic hangovers all the time, but like, you ever think you might be hungover from the food you ate yesterday?
Yeah. Happens a lot.
Yeah.
How much do you think is the food versus the other stuff?
What do you mean by other stuff?
Like the content you're consuming, the people you're around, like
Man,
not feeling your emotions.
It's hard to say. And if I'm being totally honest, I think like obviously as the nutrition guy, like I got very gung ho on it and it was like, this is it. Like, cause it was like when I first healed my acne and all that stuff, like this is it. This is the thing that everyone needs. And it's true. It's a huge part of it. But like, especially when I went through my burnout, like I was still eating well and I was like working out as much as my body would allow. But for some reason I still felt like crap. So it's like, what's going on? Like I do breath work. I meditate. Like what else? What more mindset stuff do I need to do? Like I got this. Totally. And then it was like the emotional healing I didn't know. So I think that was like a huge piece of it. But even just an example, this past weekend, I did a 2-day complete phone detox. Like my phone was off for 48 hours. And I didn't realize, especially as like a wellness content creator, how much I'm really on my phone. I mean, I do, but you don't really, and this is what I always say to my clients, sometimes you don't know how bad you felt until you start feeling good.
Totally.
And you can only realize how bad you had felt until you release and eliminate the thing that was making you feel bad. And so like, it wasn't even this like this crazy, oh my God, I feel so much better. It was just like this, I don't know, just like sense of peace and calm just after 2 days. And so to answer your question, long story short, like, yeah, it's like, it's everything that sucks your dopamine, which can be toxic food, which can be, you know, scrolling on social media or watching toxic news or hang out with people, all they do is complain.
Yeah, it's a big
like,
one.
Those little hits of like egoic, like, I'm gonna like complain about this because it just makes me feel good in the moment, or I'm gonna people please. And those are like little mini dopamine hits that add up. And so I guess to fully answer your question, I mean, I would say like food is just a form of self-respect. And so is like building boundaries on your phone and with people you hang out with. But I mean, I have to say that food is at least like 50 to 60% of it. Well,
I feel like, I mean, to me, food is the gateway drug to spirituality. Like, you know, it's like,
I like that.
I think when I first got into nutrition, I would go to all these big conferences and meet all these people. I'm like, why are all these people spiritual? I wasn't spiritual yet. And then you start to realize, because you're detoxing the body, right? And you're opening yourself up. You're opening up your channel naturally. And so it's just a natural, like I had to clear out all those toxins for everything else to open up. You know, it's just like a natural pathway there. And even just, and same with exercise, like how that actually connects you with your vessel, you know, that conscious awareness. But yeah, it all goes together. And I mean, so I was just talking about this with a group of my clients this week, and I had lost my period for 5 years. I had amenorrhea and I had tried everything. And like with all my chronic illness, I mean, I have tried every diet, every wacky thing, like it was everything. So I went all the way in the nutrition side of things. And then I went down the energetic path. And like with my period, I was doing all the physical things. I was doing all of the energetic things. I was doing all the sacral chakra work. I was doing all the feminine energy work. And I just knew I needed to go away. And so I took a staycation up in San Clemente.
Love that.
I booked an Airbnb for 7 days and I told everybody, I'm going up there for 7 days. I'm not bringing my phone.
Good for you.
I'm going to have no technology. I'm going to sit there for 7 days. And it was the first time in my life I had, because it wasn't just not being on the phone. It was like, I mean, there's no phone, no computer, no reading books, no listening to music. And I also told myself no movement, because it was like, I was always still going, you know, and I knew I needed rest. And I was like, I got to go full. I never gone like full stop. I would like go on trips and like not use my phone, but I'm still like going on walks and hiking and being in nature. And I'm like, what the I was so at my wit's end. And that experience was so profound for me, because I was like, I mean, I'm in this Airbnb by myself, nothing to distract me. I know no one. I went somewhere where I don't know anyone and I'm like not allowed to, you know, busy myself. And it took, well, first of all, the first 4 days I slept 17 hours. each night. And I was like, I didn't realize how fucking tired I was. And then I would just sit there, and a couple things happened. First, it took me that first at least 3, maybe 4 days. And I remember at that point, it was like, oh my God, I'm finally in my field. And I had thought about all of the weekend phone detoxes or tech detoxes I had taken. And I'm like, I've never actually gone this deep. And that was powerful for me, because I'm like, it really took like a full 4 days for me to get rid of all of people's energy in my field. And I was like, whoa, I'm alone. And I don't think I had ever felt like that in my whole life. And I think for me, that was powerful, of seeing how much we don't realize all that's in our field. I was like, I hadn't used any tech for 4 days, and I was still feeling it. It takes that long. And then the rest of the time, what was interesting was suddenly all these like random memories were popping up. And I had been doing years of like trauma healing and coaching and whatever, and shadow work and all this. And the memories that came up were so like random, like I don't even want to say repressed. It was like, it seemed so insignificant. And these were all of these little t micro traumas that for some reason, were stuck in my body. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, and I was just noticing if I had any reaction to them, and any that I had a negative reaction to, like, oh yeah, that annoyed me that person said something rude. Oh, I'm like, I got to work through that. Right. But it was stuff that never had come up in coaching and therapy and whatever. And so I went through that. And on the last day, I was like, I've never felt this just like rested. Like I'm literally just sleeping and existing. And on the last day, I got my period back.
Wow.
It was like so divine. It was like I knew it was going to happen. I was like, it's going to happen the last day after I had tried everything. And I just feel like, that was such a profound experience for me, of recognizing like just how much we need to slow down and just how much we're going. And I think even when we think we're resting, like so much of how we rest is we're still going. And I know like I've certainly dealt with burnout too. And I want to talk to you about that. For me, it's been this interesting thing of realizing like how many health practices have also burnt me out, and like, it's like, sometimes I'm like, self-care day, rest day. And I'm like, I was busy all day. I got a lymphatic drainage massage. I was in the sauna. I did the cold plunge, and I'm like, I'm actually kind of tired, and I think we have to watch that of like, and even like the stress, with like food and stuff. And like, my food philosophy has changed a lot, but I think that it's that rest and like silence piece. We never get that. And I don't know how we're going to solve that really, Yeah,
that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. That's really inspiring. And doing the 2-day phone detox was just like a little like, but
you feel a huge difference.
And that's really cool. And I've been like thinking about doing something like that. Over the holidays, for Christmas, I went to like a log cabin by myself in the woods in Connecticut. And that was like only 48 hours. I ended up like just kind of reflecting on the year prior, because I had just gone through like a huge awakening, and was just very grateful and just kind of reflecting on it all. But I would really love to do something like that. And just like I was saying before, sometimes you don't know how bad you felt until you start feeling good. I also think the same is true for rest. Like sometimes you don't know how tired you were until you allow yourself to rest.
100%.
And I've had those experiences for sure, just when it comes to like some somatic work, or just like getting into the body, and then getting into a safe space where like your body's like, holy crap, I can finally stop running away from the lion or the tiger or the bear. And I think that's exactly what happened to me when I transitioned from my corporate job to full-time entrepreneurship. It's like 2 months before I left my job, I really started to get these like gut health issues and like afternoon energy crashes. And especially as a health coach, like that was just like mega imposter syndrome and like kind of identity crisis. But from a physical perspective, it was like I started to have all this extra time in my calendar, and I went through, definitely deep depression. And what I realized is that I was depressed because I needed deep rest. And like it showed up as like ADHD and procrastination and anxiety and like whatever I was labeling it as, but it was really just my body being like, holy crap, like you gotta slow down. And like the way you've been living for so long, like it's all just basically like now it's like catching up to you, because you've basically been numbing it out for so long. And so entrepreneurship, I feel like, is like a turbocharger to self-development, because it just forces you
it is
to figure yourself out.
100%. Well, and it's a lot of people just running on in freeze for long extended periods of time.
I was paralyzed. Like that was like the best word I could use to describe like where I was at. And it was just like chronic procrastination.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just went from the guy who wakes up at 5 a.m. and does an ice bath and like reads his book and does a sauna and like does all this productive stuff before the day even starts. And now like I can't even like, I'm hitting the snooze button till like 8:30 because I have the freedom to do it. But I was like, this is interesting. Like, why is this happening?
So what did you do with that? How did you move forward from there?
Yeah. So I think it was like, it was a solid like 16 months of like, again, what I labeled as
16 months. Yeah. People are not going to want to hear that.
Yeah, I know. It was a long time. It was a long time. And I think to your point of like having a strong vision and mission, like there was like a little ember inside of me that was still burning that just knew that this was happening for a reason, even though it was confusing as shit to be like, but is it different this time? Like, am I on like the wrong path? Do I need to like change? Do I need to quit? Do I need to give up? But yeah, I think it was a lot of like getting into nature and just like trying to unplug. And like when I first left my corporate job, I went to Hawaii for a little bit, and then I was like in Italy, and that was all great. But I think I also realized that, you know, wherever you go, there you will be.
Yeah.
You know, and like you can't just like run away from your problems. Yes, like switching up your environment definitely helps, but like wherever you are physically, if you're not like there in your own mind, then it's just not going to be a good time. So that's where I was at for 16 months, just like not feeling good with where I was at in my own mind. And like, even though I was still like enrolling clients and like the business was moving, like it felt like I was like resentful. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was, just like super confused and like just honestly, paralyzed, like overwhelmed. And it was just a lot of confusion for a long time. And I was like trying to figure some things out of my own for a good bit and just like kind of using the tools that I had. But, you know, there was a new version of me that was like evolving, and there were skills that I didn't have that I didn't know I needed, which again, like we mentioned before, was that emotional healing. And just by the grace of God, I got hit with a sponsored ad, and, you know, a mentor that I ended up hiring was like the biggest blessing to this point in my life. And like the worst thing that's ever happened to me is now the best thing that's ever happened to me, because it's like been that portal for awakening. And just like before, I didn't know that like food was affecting me in so many ways. Like I didn't know that not healing my emotional stored traumas was holding me back, and like people pleasing and not building boundaries and all these things that were never taught.
Yeah.
And so I guess to answer your question of like what I did with that is I kept putting one foot in front of the other. And like, you know, I have nothing against like medication or like Western medicine. And I think genuinely it can be a good resolution for folks that are just at their breaking point. And I felt like I was at my breaking point, like probably like 4 specific times I can remember. And like, you know, like my parents and like siblings or whoever, like, hey, like maybe it's time to like just kind of swallow your pride and like maybe take some medication, like maybe get help. And they weren't forceful about it. They were just like, they want help and they care. But there was something inside of me personally that just like didn't align with it. So it's like, this is really freaking hard to keep going with the way I'm waking up every single day, like just super uncertain about what's next. And like, feeling like it would just be easier if I, wasn't here anymore, honestly. And it got really dark, but there was just something inside of me that kept going. And whether that's the divine or just like my vision and my mission, I just kept holding on to faith. And that's the hardest thing, is just like stepping through uncertainty, I feel. And so that's what I did. I hired a mentor, even though I feel like I couldn't afford the program at the time. And I was really scared. And it was like I had already hired like 4 or 5 business coaches prior who helped me. But just like I felt like I was in this cycle of like constantly hiring coaches and like rinse and repeat. But there was just something super authentic and genuine about this guy. And I basically just said yes and moved forward, even though there was fear. And I think that's like the hardest thing for people to do. And it's probably the biggest key to evolving and growing, if that's what you seek, is just like being scared and doing it anyway.
100%. Well, I mean, you've also just got to really want it for yourself. I mean, I haven't thought about this in a while. I mean, when I was like really, really at my darkest, like with depression. I mean, I had started, learning about all the nutrition pieces, and that was changing things. And then it got so bad, and I was like, fuck it, I was so against medication. And then I was so bad that I was like, I will try whatever. I don't even care anymore. And I went through apparently every SSRI they could try, and nothing worked. And then they eventually diagnosed me as SSRI intolerant. And now I look back at it and I'm just like, jokes on me. Like my body was like, no, bitch, like you don't get to fucking bypass this. You know what I mean? And but I think on a deep, like my body was not going to let that work for me because that wasn't going to fix it, And I think that's the other piece. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm just a big believer of,
that's a great point.
That darkness is pushing us to our highest alignment. And if I try and slap a Band-Aid over it, like even if it gives me some momentary relief, which is really more like I'm more like a zombie than anything, like the problem is still there, and something else in my life is going to push me there. It'll be another trauma. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing about that kind of stuff too. It's like, you've got to get to the root of it, or you're just going to be brought there in another direction, and like, I'm so glad none of that worked. Right. And it was also just, I think from the beginning, I was like, for me, it was like, I was kind of forced into it, by a lot of my doctors. And I was just kind of like, my intuition was right, but I think that when it comes to the emotional healing, that can feel very overwhelming for people. Obviously having help is like key, like you can't do that. You can't on your own. You absolutely can't. And you have to work with the right person for you. How did you know that was the right person for you?
Authenticity and someone who was really genuine. And I think that's like when I was so dysregulated and so burnt out, like I felt like I couldn't trust anyone or anything. Totally. Like I didn't know which supplement was right for me. I didn't know what business coach to hire. Like my whole news feed is just health stuff. Like this is good, this is bad. And I obviously had my own toolbox, but I think what I realized is that like I felt like I couldn't trust anything or anyone is just because like I couldn't trust myself. And that's where like the inner work really changed things. But I think that like trust and just like resonance and truth isn't something we always like, we can really see or hear. It's just something we feel. And that's what I felt from this guy, even though I was like super inconfident and like just really scared and didn't know what to do. But basically I just borrowed his confidence at that time. And I was like, I was like, I mean, not doing something is also a choice.
Totally. Yeah.
And I was like, well, I've been trying to kind of do this on my own for the past 8 months now. And I know a lot, and I've hired some other coaches, but there's just a perspective that I guess I don't have. And maybe this guy has it. And like, I don't know if it's going to work out, but I'd rather try and say that I tried than not trying at all.
Yeah. So what were some of the life changes you made, whether that's like regarding boundaries, people pleasing? Like, can you give some tangible things for you of like changes you made?
Yeah. There's so much. And that's part of something I'm working on, is like how to, like, there's so much in my head and like so much that I've learned. Like I want to write books. You're inspiring me to like do podcasts. It's like, how do I narrow it down to like the things? I mean, it's always, there's so much, but I mean, I guess from like an intangible perspective, the things that I like allowed and embraced was vulnerability. Like that's probably the number one thing that's helped heal me.
Were you not before?
I mean, I feel like I was, especially with like my acne journey and all that stuff. But when I think it's like a new level that the universe presents to you that you haven't talked about, or you like still kind of get this egoic, like, oh, what are people going to think of me? Like, I think everything is a skill. And so, I think like especially as a health coach, like struggling with my health and having these like gut issues and afternoon crashes, it was like, this is all the stuff that I was like teaching people about how like to not let that happen. But I was just like, running myself to the ground, like trying to break up of a relationship. I was trying to leave my corporate job. I was trying to figure out how to do that. I was doing 2 jobs at once. I was doing ice baths. I was intermittent fasting. And it was just like mega overload on my body.
Mm-hmm.
But then just like, you know, being a human
Yeah.
and just being like, hey, like this is what I'm going through, and like writing about it. Honestly, like I look at my Instagram as like a personal digital journal that other people just have the blessing of seeing, and hopefully it relates to them.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like some of the captions I put in there is like selfishly, like it's for me.
Totally.
And I just get super vulnerable, and I'm like, well, maybe someone else feels like this. So I'm just going to click the send button, see what happens. And then like, yeah, your energy just kind of attracts that, because it's so rare nowadays for people to just like talk about how they actually feel. And I get it. It can be scary. And it's something I take for granted, is like that skill of vulnerability. I think everything in this life is a skill. And I think that's probably the number one thing that has helped heal me, because I didn't realize how much like energy it takes to like hold something in and like suppress it.
I mean,
and I think
so
it's super
much.
underrated.
Totally. I mean, so much of my healing was this podcast and talking about my journey. Like, you know, this podcast was with me through all of it, like through the worst times of everything, you know, and it's also what's built such a strong community, because the people who have, a lot of people have been with me for 10 years.
It's amazing.
And it's like, we're family, and they know more about me than a lot of like everybody else. Right. Yeah. And also before the podcast, I had started, I was blogging, and my blog got really big because I was writing about it. And I'm writing about these very intimate, you know, feelings and experiences, and it attracts a certain frequency of person, and it just builds these bonds. But for me, it was like moving that energy, expressing it on the page, like, yes, helping people is important, but it was all selfish of like, let me just move this out, you know? There's a creativity to that. I mean, that's a form of energy work, right? Like we're moving it out, and it was like so core for me with healing. And I think like not everybody needs to put their life on the internet, right? That's also come with other stressors. Like that was another, like a later form of burnout for me, actually came from too much internet exposure. Like I got, you know, CPTSD from all of the input from everybody listening to my podcast and reading on my stuff. Like that's the other side of it too. But I think it's really important, like, that people prioritize expressing, you know, and I look at like a lot of my clients, for example, and I'm like, I cannot be the only space that you talk about your feelings with. And you're only talking about your feelings because I'm seeing it in your body and like pointing it back, and you're like admitting it. You know, it's like it does take so much. It takes energy, you know? And so I think the other piece here is like support system. You know, and I'm curious your thoughts on that, and like how you help clients with that, like your experience with that. That's been a huge thing for me. Like I think one of my big lessons was really more about like boundaries is like a theme for me, a big theme for me.
I love that.
And so obviously that comes up with clients a lot, but it's like, it's been my support system that I feel has been make it or break it for me, because it's like, it's not just about having people around, it's the right people. And I think that sometimes having support, but like unsupportive support was what was making me sick. You know? So I would love for you to share like, you know, how you cultivate your support system and like the role that's played for you.
Yeah, it's absolutely everything. I was listening to a TED Talk the other day, and I forget the exact stats, but it was basically like, when you like commit to a goal to yourself, like the chances that you achieve it is like 10%. And then if you write it down, it's like 45%. And then if you say it to somebody else, it's like 65. And then if you actually have someone like physically hold you accountable, it's like 95%. So I think that's everything. And I think that there's some maybe egoic like washing in our own brains of like, oh, I have to like prove to myself that I can like do this alone. But the reality is like, you're always the one doing the work yourself. Nobody's putting the fork in your mouth. Nobody's picking up the phone and putting it into your hand. Nobody's telling you when to go to bed. It's like, you're the one that's making the choice. But the thing is, you can do it with other people. You can literally see yourself in others. And that was like kind of the awakening that I had, honestly, was joining this mentorship program and like just sharing vulnerably with other people. And that really can only happen when the space feels safe. And the mentor that I hired did a really good job of that. And honestly, there were probably at least 5 or 6 Zoom calls with 15 plus people on them where I was just like crying in front of people. And like when you just allow other humans to see you in your mess, but also in your beauty, and that the beauty actually is the mess. And just allowing yourself to be seen has been so transformational for me. So I've coached 70 clients at this point. And for like 2.5 years, they were all one-on-one clients. And speak of boundaries. I mean, I got my clients great results, and like, you know, I feel like I'm putting it all out there, and I'm, you know, making sacrifices to help people. But, you know, you really do have to fill up your own cup to fill up others. And so, you know, eventually it just didn't work anymore. Like I was like doing these like crazy customized one-on-one nutrition coaching programs, which really, you know, have helped people. But I'm now at a point where what I experienced with my mentor and like healing in a community, that like I would actually feel like I'm doing a disservice to my clients if I didn't allow for that community aspect. And it's like people are saying things on these calls or asking questions that people didn't even know that they needed to hear. And that 100%. Was the thing that clicked for them. And so, for me, it's like just getting, like, my perspective is great. If you're looking to improve your health and your nutrition, like that's cool. Like I can tell you a lot. I can give you my journey, my perspective. But when you have the perspective of 5, 6, 7, 8 other people, it's like, you know, they might be going through something similar, something that I haven't actually dealt with, and they have. And so that power, I think, it's everything. And, you know, I think the pandemic highlighted it, but it's also just the way that this country and most of the world is set up is just for like isolation and naturally being lonely, which it's a biological mechanism from our human body to connect with other people. And community is medicine. And 100%. Like for me, like I've been in San Diego for 5 years now, and like it was like 6 months before the pandemic hit that I moved out, and then the pandemic hit, and like, you know,
lucky timing.
Yeah, people move away, and I was like at a corporate job that I was like slowly, you know, I was just so passionate about the nutrition stuff, like just trying to kind of move into that, and didn't really like go to happy hours. Had a lot of friends in San Diego that like to do different things, but again, people move out of the city, like kind of going to these happy hours I didn't want to go to, and also launching a business. Like I was kind of like, you know, it served its purpose for a while, but like really isolating myself, and I was able to grow it a lot. And then, the pandemic was like 2 years of in and out. And then I went through 16 months of burnout. And so like really took me like 3.5 or 4 years out of the 5 I've almost been here to like really feel connected to this city. And I think what I learned is that it was because I connected to myself. Then I actually genuinely wanted to go connect with other people because I wanted to be seen. And so for me, like taking care of your health is like just the most pivotal thing for your own happiness and success, because if you don't feel good, or you don't feel good about yourself, you don't want to be seen, and then you don't go network, and then you don't meet the person that could change your life. And so, I think community is it's, for me, it's been like the number one healing tool.
100%. Well, I totally echo what you said about just like those group containers. Like I have a similar experience now, and I think that's something like on the client side, they don't always understand. Like, no, I want one-on-one. I'm like, no. I'm like, it's literally not as helpful. I will die on that hill. It's not as helpful. Like for me on my own journey, and like what I see with clients again and again, like because we heal through relationship. We do. And there's so many other ripple out effects of being in containers like that. One of which, for so many people, like I know what's going to happen every time. It's like kind of a joke at this point. Like every time we do a new group, people are going to lose all their friends, and they're going to break up with their partners, and they're going to leave their jobs, right? Because they feel what it feels like for the first time to be supported and to be in a space where like, I don't know any of these people. They're from all over the world. And here I feel safe to cry and to talk about how I feel and what I really want. And then you go into your regular life and you're like, I can't open up my throat chakra with my partner, right? Or like my best friend, like we don't even have anything really in common. Like, and I think that's a very big awakening moment for a lot of people. And so I think that's the other piece. It's like, you've got to know what you're looking for. I know in my journey, that's been like a big refinement piece of like, I don't know, like if I have to be so clear of like, do I feel safe to be vulnerable with you? You know, and I think that's the thing about even like moving here, right? You move to a new city and you meet people, and how many friends are out of convenience, right? I just start to notice that a lot of people don't know what it's like to actually feel safe, to actually feel supported. And it's like, that has to be core, I think, for our bodies to be in relaxation, of course.
Yeah. That's so powerful, and it's so true. And I think that's exactly what I felt when I joined this container. I was like, I don't even know what this guy said or what I'm supposed to do, but the way that he just made me feel was something I've never felt before.
Yeah.
And it's like so simple yet so powerful. And now it's been so cool that I've experienced it. I'm like paying it forward to my community and my clients. And I know you've done a handful of these, but like I just hosted my first ever retreat at my house a couple months ago, and just getting vulnerable. I told my story. I brought in a friend who was also a client, and he was like addicted to heroin at one point, and he told his journey and about like the emotional healing and like just the tone that sets and the space that creates. Like people were crying within the first like 10 minutes. And it's like, they've just been suppressing these things for so long. And it's like, it's literally just like emptiness. I don't know if emptiness is the right word, but just like space to like allow these things to happen. And as soon as you feel safe, and that's when you can actually start healing. And so, I mean, like my first ever cohort, the group coaching is like, I had a 25-year-old, like a 30-year-old, probably like a 37-year-old, 45-year-old, and actually my dad, who's like 65. And it's so cool to see like such a diverse group of people who have experienced different things for a certain amount of times, and like for them to actually get different perspectives from each other is really cool. Because I get this question sometimes, like, oh, like what's your demographic? Like who do you like target? I'm like, it's the psychographic. It's like people that want to be their highest expression and
100%.
like know what they're, capable of, and actually potentiating that. And I think it's actually more valuable to have a 25-year-old listen to a 65-year-old, and also a 65-year-old listen to a 25-year-old,
100%.
Especially when it comes to like vulnerability and opening up. And it's been one of the most rewarding things for me, honestly, is seeing my dad go through my program, and just, it's not his fault. And I'm sure many men and just many humans, especially baby boomers, like are not taught to express themselves. And, he's been through a lot of health stuff, and to see him like actually just like talk about it in a group space. And even like we did some breath work together, and he's like said some things about how like he saw his dad, which his dad died when he was 6 years old. And to like kind of just like give back to someone who's given me so much is just like, there's nothing more fulfilling, and it's all through that safe space.
That's really powerful. Like, I mean, that's not easy to, classic, like you're not supposed to coach your family. I mean, it's like, because it's like, sometimes you don't want to fully open up. So, I mean, that's a testament to you guys for sure. Like how safe that is.
Yeah, I think
really
we've become
beautiful.
a lot closer because of it, honestly.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, what a gift for him. I was just talking to somebody else about that. I'm like, so much of that part of like inner child healing, it's like you learn, the wounds you have from little things that happen with your parents. But then you like hit a point where I was like, to complete that, I realized the other half of it is like, I chose my parents, they chose me. And those same things that I picked up as kind of like maybe wounds from interactions with them, like I'm supposed to heal for them. And it's like that full circle moment. Like, for example, I mean, the burnout thing is one of those. So like, I grew up, if I'm just resting, Christina, you're being lazy, get up, go do something else. Right. Like both my parents are really hard workers and glorified the hustle. And so I learned it was never safe for me to, calm down, or to rest. And so that was like a wound for me about like, I'm not valuable or worthy unless I'm grinding, unless I'm like overachieving. And then now, like in adulthood, like, I move through all of that wounding, and then I come back home and I'm talking to my parents, and I'm looking and I'm like, Mom, you can rest. Mom, like praising her for resting and seeing how it's like that full circle of like, hey, I had to go through that to understand how she feels. So I could have that empathy and compassion and connection. And like, I actually get to be the one that can help them complete that healing. That's powerful. And I think that's like that full circle piece. We really get to have that, like that contract with our parents is so deep. And I know not everyone's, not going to be the same for everybody, but for me, that was such a beautiful full circle moment. Like, and I think that part often goes incompleted, realizing like we are also here to heal them.
Yeah. It's really powerful.
And parent them.
Yeah. Super grateful for that opportunity. And like my mom has actually been on like the chronic heartburn medication for like 30 years. And like my dad recently went through my program, and she's been kind of like catching on to some of the stuff that he's doing and just like seeing his energy change. And then I went back home recently, forget why, but yeah, we just had some like, I was home for 2 weeks. Yeah, it was 2 weeks before I went to Europe, a little pit stop for my birthday and both their birthdays actually. And yeah, we just had some like, you know, kitchen side dinner table chats, and like it wasn't just like one conversation, but it was like one and then like another one a couple of days later, and then just like some more perspective. And this is something I've been trying to help my mom with like since I got into the health space. Like, you know, all these like PPIs are linked to like Alzheimer's, and you know, they strip calcium out of your bones, and just it destroys your stomach acid, and it's not good. And she's known that, and I think there's just been a fear because it's so familiar, and like that's just what the doctor has told her. And then I think just like the way, because I've been able to transform myself and the perspective I've gained, the way I've been able to kind of like get more to the root like through these conversations, and the way I'm speaking to her, because I basically used to say the same thing, or was like trying to get the same point across, but the way that I'm saying it now and helping her see differently was actually the thing that like moved the needle forward. And so now she's like technically been, after 30 years, she's off the chronic heartburn medications for now, I think it's been like 10 weeks.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, and she's like feeling so much better, and she's like not drinking coffee anymore, and like that to me, it's like there's just no better gift to give back to the people who have given me so much.
So you think like what landed differently was just like the embodiment, or like what do you think landed differently?
Yeah, I think the embodiment, and also like just teaching her where maybe the resistance comes from. And a lot of that is just rooted in fear and familiarity.
Yeah, but not every parent wants to hear that from their child too,
no,
you know?
But I think again, like it just kind of like organically, like it would just happen at the dinner table.
Yeah.
And I almost like felt like I like went into like coaching mode without really trying.
Yeah.
Just because of like it's just the knowledge I have now, and I just want to help my mom. And so yeah, embodiment, and also like being kind of brutally honest about the truth. And I think the people that you've said this before, like the people who care about you most they'll just tell you the truth because they care about you. And even if it hurts your feelings in that moment, it's exactly what you need to hear. And they're saying that to you because they care about you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also it's like, I think a lot of people struggle with this, like, because they love their family and they want their family to hear them around like making lifestyle changes. And sometimes it's like they don't want, you don't always want to hear it from your family. And then there's also all those other fears and all that. But I know for me in my journey, like I was trying to force, and what worked for me was just living by example. I did my thing. I stopped, not that I didn't care. Of course I cared, but I cared so much I was causing more resistance. And I was like, I'm just going to let them watch me change my life and heal myself.
That's it.
And as I did that, they came to me. Right. And I tell people, I'm like, you just got to like be the example and give them proof.
So true.
And then people open up. But I think there's also that piece of like releasing attachment and letting people be on their journey. I think we all have that. There are all kinds of things in my life people have told me ahead of time, and I just had to do it on my own time. And I think that's the other piece of it too. And there's like so many layers. I mean, to your point, even with like that generation, like they really, I'm so grateful, like with our generation, we're learning to feel our feels and talk about it. And like, they didn't have any of that. There's so much suppressed. And I think just kind of having some grace toward that as well.
Yeah. That's so powerful because, I mean, even a couple years back, like I literally bought my parents like thousands of dollars worth of like health gifts, and they didn't use a single one. Yeah. And it was all from like my heart, and like I wanted to help, but I didn't realize that I was like forcing the issue. And it's obviously tougher when it's family because like, those tend to be the people you care about the most. So like, we got to honor everyone's journey, but like when they mean so much to you, like selfishly, you're like, I really want to help them. So I want to keep them around for as long as I can and keep them happy and healthy. But that's so powerful. And honestly, like that's exactly what happened. And it's like the words that my dad said to me directly was like, seeing you go from Mike Schmidt A to Mike Schmidt B was like, wow, like I can do that too. And the day he called me, like I'll remember it forever. Like he's my dad. So he calls me to catch up, but I could tell the way he like just opened up the conversation, and just like the way he called me, in a sense, like I could tell the main reason he was calling was because he wanted to do my program.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because like
Wow.
I'm his son or he's my dad. Like he wanted it because he saw like how, because I went back home to Massachusetts a lot to give myself permission to rest, and I was miserable. Like I was a zombie, and he saw it firsthand.
Yeah.
And then he saw from a distance, like, and then, you know, having these family reunions, like seeing me go from that to where I am now, and like the vibrancy and the health. He's like, whoa, like he must be doing something right.
Yeah, 100%. Let me ask you, so I have a lot of, it's funny because like in my work, I would say publicly, it seems like I'm like primarily female based. In my private practice, I work, it's majority of male entrepreneurs.
Wow.
Like executives, founders, whatever, in San Diego and LA. And they need to feel their feels and release the emotions. And it's like, just by, you know, virtue of the container, once again, it's like, I'm like, you need to be in groups. You need to go to like be in a group setting, you know. And I think it's harder for men. And I also think it's harder for men who feel like they have like a public image, you know. And I think it's different for different clients and friends I have. But I actually think a big issue is more that a lot of my male clients, like, they actually are good at expressing themselves, but they don't know what they need to express. Like, it's not just I can't share my emotions, I don't have space to. It's more of a, I don't know what my emotions are. And it's not until I'm like psychically like, you're feeling this way, they're like, oh, you're right. And then they can open it up, you know? And so I want to ask you, like, what has helped you like connect in with the things you're actually feeling, like maybe from a long time ago now? Like, what helps you connect in with your emotions and recognize how you're actually feeling to be able to move them into expression, right? Because you can't be vulnerable if you don't even like really know what you need to express.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think like white space and time for nothingness, because oftentimes it's literally, it's actually harder to do nothing than it is to like continue to do something.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no one ever does
that. And so, yeah, I think just like kind of also destigmatizing like all the things that come with like, I don't know, just like healing in the health space. I mean, honestly, like, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like health coaches, most of them are women, and most of these like breathwork classes I go to are women. And it's like a lot of the stuff I do in the health space is just like, sometimes I'm literally the only guy there.
Yeah.
But like, I don't give a shit. Like, I'm like, I know what makes me feel good, and I'm just going to do that. And so like, just, yeah, sort of destigmatizing that on the front end. And yeah, I think just like getting out of the head and into the body, whether that be just like literally asking yourself the question, like what do I really want right now? Or like, what do I really need? Or like, how do I actually feel? Sometimes people don't want to hear that truth from their own self, but yeah, I would say like, now that I think about it out loud, like when I first signed up with my mentor, before I even started this program, I think I enrolled like a month prior to it starting. And he was like, dude, I've been where you've been at. Like, you need some nervous system regulation, like go do some Reiki. And honestly, I would say Reiki was probably one of the biggest catalysts in my life, because I basically told myself to die on the Reiki table.
Wow.
Because I was like, what I had realized a pattern was in my life is just like constant worst case scenario, like of everything. And just like this ultimate, you know, thing maybe I've inherited as a trauma, but also just like things I've been subjected to and conditioned to in my life is just like, no matter what I'm worrying about, like I'm just automatically thinking like the worst possible thing can happen. Just like being a worrywart. And I realized how much that didn't serve me. And I was like, all right, well, like if I'm constantly thinking this, like what is the worst thing that can happen? And then as I kind of learned from my coach, like any fear we have is really just kind of a biological, like subconscious fear of death. And so I was like, well, what if I just died? And I was like, well, I wonder how that feels. And so I was on the Reiki table and I was just like, you know, letting the energy happen and go through me. I was like, dude, just like die, just like let go and just die. I wonder how that feels. And it felt really good.
Wow.
And it was like, I think that was like a massive ego death for me.
Yeah.
And I think I've also always just been kind of I don't know. I think like in high school and stuff, I definitely suppressed a lot. but I've been like a sensitive person, which I always thought was like a weakness, but now I'm realizing is actually a superpower. And so, yeah, I think that like, yeah, getting into the body, whether it's Reiki or like breath work or whatever it is for you, or like even acupuncture, those are the things that really just kind of communicate to you what's actually going on. And like, I think also just awareness. Like some people don't realize that, like for me, for 7 years, I didn't realize that all this food I was eating was actually causing my acne. Or some people don't realize that if you're on birth control for more than 10 years, it literally increases your risk of hypothyroidism by 248%.
Yeah.
Or like psoriasis on your skin, or like gut health issues. Like people don't often put two and two together. And so we have to like sort of audit what's going on in our life and be like, what are the things that I'm doing, or like what's my emotion I'm feeling right now, because emotion is just energy in motion. Like where am I putting my energy, and what's the resulting emotion I'm feeling from that? It's like taking stock of like, oh crap, like I actually had 7 hours of screen time today on my phone. Maybe if I eliminate that, I'll start feeling better.
Yeah. I mean, and I also think so much of it, like, yes to all of that, and people have normalized all these symptoms. That's the other piece. It's like, I'll ask people, and I remember this was so much more of a thing when I was working as a nutritionist. I'd be like, how's your digestion? Great. I'm like, yeah, how many times have you pooped in the last week? 0. I'm like, yeah, great. I'm like, how often are you bloated? They're like, every day. I'm like, your digestion is great. They're like, yeah. You know, it's like people literally like don't know what's normal. And even with like the anxiety or the depression, a lot of people live that way. You know, they're used to being anxious. They don't even realize there's another way to go through life. I mean, I didn't know there was another way. I know I didn't feel good, but I had no concept of another way of feeling, you know? So I think that's the other piece is like, I think we set up at the awareness and like, even just like writing that down. There's something for me when I just write down everything I'm thinking or doing or whatever. And I like, it's something that seeing it on paper, I'm like, I don't know if that's good. Like, I don't know that I'm like,
so true.
You know, it's like maybe, oh yeah, I've been tired this week. But then if I look back at my journal, I'm like, I'm like a 2 out of 10 energy 5 days in a row. I'm like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think like it really just is that simple awareness that you're talking about, like, and that perspective shift.
And evidence is the loudest voice.
Yes.
Right. So you see it on paper and you're like, oh, and to be totally honest with you, like, you know, whether it's like the smoking or alcohol or vaping or shopping or stress eating, like it's always just a way to regulate the nervous system. And like, as I went through my burnout, like even though I was eating like healthier food, like I was definitely stress eating. Yeah. And I don't think I like realized how much I was using it as like a way to just escape my feelings. And it's the same thing with like the phone. And it's kind of a shame because like people who are alcoholics or like drug addicts, like they're shamed so much. It's like such a stigma with it, but it's like we don't ever talk about how people have 8 hours of screen time on their phone, or you know, people who are like binge eating and whatever it is. Like it's all just a way to like escape. And but I think that's where you can meet yourself with grace and be like, oh wow, like I am actually juggling a lot in my life right now. Like I'm actually under intense stress. So like, you know, I think the old me, especially as a health coach, like when that would happen, I'd be so hard on myself and I'd like shame myself and guilt trip myself. And if it comes up now, right, like occasionally I'll just be like, oh, wow, like I'm a human. Yeah. Okay. Like I'm under like absurd stress, and the world we live in is like mega overstimulation. Like the old me would have XYZ. And I think that's where you can say you made progress. And yeah, I think a lot of people are trapped into this like, oh, it's my fault, or like there's something wrong with me. And I was actually just going on like a TEDx YouTube binge the other day. And it just kind of reminded me, because, you know, a lot of this stuff I kind of take for granted, but there was a couple ones that were just talking about like the industrialization of the food system. And one guy was basically just like, yeah, we've all, because the cigarette industry bought all the big food companies like whatever, 40 years ago. And he was basically just saying how like the industrialized food system is like this big experiment that everybody involuntarily didn't even know they signed up for. Yeah. And it's like in America, it's like innocent until proven guilty. And it's like you see it, California is banning 4 ingredients not till 2027. But it's like, yeah, they're just going to keep doing it until someone says they can't. Yeah. And it's like, we're just the lab rats. And so just like bringing yourself back to like nature and knowing that you are nature and like connecting with it will help you connect deeper with yourself, whether that's physically going into nature or like eating nature, right? Eating real food. Yeah. So I think that's just like, that's part of my mission, is just like humanizing yourself and like knowing that all these things that are chalked up as normal, and like these crazy cranking corporate jobs that we work, and all this like barrage of crazy food everywhere, and the media.
Yeah.
It's like our biology hasn't changed for 40 to 50,000 years, yet the technological advances that have happened in the past 200, it's like we are not designed for this.
Definitely not. Yeah. And I remember like learning about that. Like I remember in college taking a class, and they were talking about how like biologically we're designed to have max like 6 close relationships at a time, and we're designed to, we would never meet in our lives more than 150 people. And they're like, how many Facebook friends do you have? Like at the time of Facebook, right? And I'm like, it's, of course we're all fucked up. I'm like, I got way more than 6 close friends, and I know way more than 150 people. And we're feeling, and now like as an energy healer, it's like, I'm like, we're feeling everybody's energy, and we're so connected, you know? And then to your point, you know, just living here, for example, even when you eat Whole Foods, like, even if they're organic, it's like sad. Like it sucks, right? Yeah. Like what's happened to our soil? Like, you know, it's like, okay, I go to Europe and I eat the same thing and I feel a million times better. It is what it is, you know, or like with personal care products and just all of the ingredients they allow over here. It's like, I think I love what you said about just kind of giving yourself grace, because there is like, to stress out about it more causes more issues. And I definitely see that too.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important to be aware, because you can't change what you're not aware of. And it's also very possible to like go over the top with it. And I did that for a while. And like, I didn't realize how much stress that alone was actually causing me. And I still give myself grace for doing that, because when you again realize kind of the simulation that we live in and the barrage of overstimulation that we're subjected to, it's just like, yeah, well, you do want to be careful, because like it does affect you. And like 1 in 2 people will get cancer at some point in their lifetime. And 94% of Americans have a metabolism that doesn't work properly. And, you know, whatever, 70% of people have at least one chronic illness. Like it's getting out of control. Yeah, and like, wild. Unfortunately, being unhealthy is really hard. Being healthy is really hard. And like, sometimes I'm like, objectively and non-egotistically, like it's crazy in my 7 years of healing, like, and especially deep into nutrition and health, it's like I feel like I know so much, but it's like literally for me this is what I need to know just to equip myself to just like walk through this life like as a normal person. Like, how do people like walk through this life without it? And then I realized the answer to that is usually not very well. And it's like they might, you know, be resulting to the Western healthcare system, or like they might just be accepting that their life has to be hard or everything is difficult, and then like that just becomes familiar. And so that's why the change I feel like is so hard, because we're so used to living life a certain way. And you know, I say like 6 years of like corporate burnout, but I realized I was kind of just sprinting with my head cut off for all 29 years of my life. And then I went through an awakening, and I was like, wow, this is like a whole new matrix of life. And I didn't know that I wanted to even feel this way, but I can't imagine it any other way.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think that even going back to like trying to convince people, it's like the divine will wake you up. You know, I'm like, I got pushed in the craziest fucking ways. That was the only way I was going to. Nobody could have convinced me to end up where I am now. And if you told me like 10 years ago I'd be doing what I do, I would be like, you're fucking crazy. You know, and it's just, your mission doesn't miss you 100%. What I want to ask you is what it means to you to be superhuman.
I love that question. Yeah, because that's something I got caught up in a lot. It was like having to be this like perfect guy, perfect, most healthy dude, have to look amazing, have to eat like super, super clean all the time. And so I think I've kind of changed the definition of like superhuman to this like juggernaut, like bulletproof person, to just like super human, like all caps on the human.
I love that.
And that's kind of honestly just like organically how it's come to be, because I think again, like when I went through my tough times and struggling with my health as a health coach, like it was just this massive identity crisis, because like that's what I defined myself as. I'm a health coach. And then when I struggled with my health, it was like, well, then what am I? Just like someone who coins themselves as an athlete or a mother or father, and then they feel like they don't live up to those standards, then it's like, who am I?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the mind fuck that happened to me for so long. So I think being a superhuman is just having the ultimate level of grace for yourself, and realizing that if you think that something's wrong with you, or you need to fix yourself, or whatever the internal dialogue is like, no, like you're living in a world that humans weren't designed to live in. And so these signals and these imbalances and this anxiety and these depressive thoughts are actually just trying to tell you that the way you're living your life isn't fucking working anymore.
Yeah. Guiding you to something better.
Yeah. Leaning into just like being vulnerable and like sharing with a tribe of people who see you and create real safety. Cause it's like, we live in this world where we're like more safe than we've ever been, and more like there's so much convenience, and there's really nothing that we're running away from. Yeah. But then it's like the food and like these emails and these, you know, constant dopamine hits from everywhere. And it's like we basically are creating these inputs where we feel like we're running away from a tiger, but we're not actually. So then our mind is so confused. Yeah. It's like we're safe, but we're not safe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the definition is really just having the ultimate level of grace with yourself, knowing that it's not your fault, and the world we live in, truly isn't normal. It's, and all these things that are like chalked up as normal, they might be statistically normal, but they're not biologically normal. And that's really what I teach people is like, how can you equip yourself with a toolbox to actually be happy and feel good in a modern day world that we have never lived in before, and therefore have never been taught how to live in it. Yeah. And so like all the stuff that I've gone through my origin story and the burnout is like, I needed to go through that to be able to understand how to equip people to get to this level of like, awareness and bliss and calm and peace and happiness. And it isn't always like that. And I know that life is always throwing more curveballs at us. And so no matter how much we've grown, and I know you know the healing journey, it's like, oh, I thought I fixed this, and oh, this came back. What's going on? It's not linear. And I think that's a huge part of being human, is just knowing that healing in life is just not linear, and you just got to embrace and enjoy the journey. Because if you keep waiting until like you get the thing or do the thing or accomplish the thing, you're literally just putting off your happiness. And so just to be able to like experience life and consciousness is a gift in and of itself.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the thing that always drove me with all of my mental health issues, my physical health issues, was I was just, and I would say this to my therapist, I was like, I just refuse to believe I came here to suffer. Like, I just like literally refuse to believe it. Like, I refuse to believe that the whole point of this is like, be on a hamster wheel, like do shit I don't like feel like a piece of shit. Like I just literally, that makes no sense to me, you know? And I think like going back to the superhuman thing, I feel like for me, it's been this full circle in the spirituality space, the same thing of like trying to teach people like spirituality and unlocking our other senses and understanding these different dimensions. Like, I don't think the point of that is to just meditate and avoid life. Like, I think the point is to enhance life, and like we're here to enjoy the human experience, right? And that's spiritually, that's physically, that's with the body. But I think, you know, people will use spirituality as a way to escape what's going on as well. And it's like, it's supposed to bring us back into our bodies and like be superhuman, you know, like right? When you're really in your human experience, you can actually enjoy it, right? And when you actually feel good, when you take care of your body, like physically, mentally, emotionally, you can actually enjoy all of the beauty that this world has to offer. And like before my health, like I could not, you know, so I really, really resonate with that, like the human part.
Yeah, I think like allowing the experience, whether that is extreme darkness or depressive thoughts or whatever it is, and just allowing that to be what it is. Because a lot of people will just, you know, I heard someone say it recently, actually through a group container. He was like, I just got off medication after being on it for like 10 years. And he was like, I didn't realize that I was like numbing my human experience. Yeah. And it's like, you can never really feel that blissfulness or extreme light without that extreme dark. And the more I dive into spirituality, I'm realizing that the darkness actually is the way to the light.
100%. Always. So what's next for you? What's coming up next?
Yeah, I'm doing another retreat at my house on June 30th. First time around was an absolute blast. We did a sound bath, some sauna, we did ice bath, we did like group triad shares. I spoke about my story and my buddy talked about his addiction story, and it was really powerful. So I'm doing that in about 2 weeks, and then in the middle of launching the second ever group cohort, Superhuman 4.0. And then other than that, I'm staying in San Diego as much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
I love to travel and experience different perspective through travel. But I also realize that San Diego is a beautiful place, and I'm very glad to hear that you're moving here and going to be around. We'll have to get to know each other even more. This has been an awesome conversation. But besides that, I'm going to Massachusetts, back home, to do a 162-mile bike ride first weekend in August for the PMC. It's the Pan Mass Challenge. It's for raising awareness for pancreatic cancer.
Cool.
So my sister's been doing it for like 10 years now because her wife's dad passed away from it like 10 years ago. So this will be my first year.
Nice.
So it's going to be exciting. Other than that, just kind of launching Superhuman 4.0 and continuing to embody my humanness as much as I can. Because I've been on cloud 9 for like 12 months since my awakening through the burnout, and it's been so great. And at the same time, like, life is always throwing its challenges, and I feel like there's been some yellow flags recently, but I'm so grateful that I even know what the yellow flags are and what I need to do and who I need to connect with to be able to bring myself back to human. Just continuing to lean into being a human and knowing that curveballs are going to come, and just continue to be vulnerable and share my story and enjoy the human experience.
Hell yeah. I love it. Well, we will put all your links
Thank you
in the show notes. I'm sure people are going to want to connect with you, and I appreciate you opening up and sharing all of that, because I know this is really going to resonate with a lot of people. So,
beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for the space.